spy convention hosted by a badger. This ain't just any capture, we're talking about swiping a Nazi U-boat right out from under their noses. And specifically, we're gonna talk about the absolute legend who led the charge onto that bobbing, potentially exploding death trap. Introducing Lieutenant Albert David. This dude was born in Maryville, Missouri, way back in 1902. He didn't just sign up for the Navy, he enlisted at 17 in 1919. Think about that, enlisted at 17. He did his basic training out in San Francisco. Now, here's the deal, this guy spent 20 years as an enlisted man. He sailed on a whole bunch of ships, battleships like the USS Arkansas and Texas, cruisers, destroyer tenders, you name it. Just putting in the work. Then, bam. September 1939, World War II kicks off in Europe. Less than a month after he transferred to the Fleet Reserve after 2 decades of service, David gets pulled back to active duty. Because, you don't mess with America's boats or anything that looks like a boat without finding some FAFO action, and apparently, there was gonna be some boat-related nonsense popping off. He spent a few years stateside, even got assigned to a submarine repair unit in San Diego for 5 months. That's gotta be ironic, right? A surface guy working on subs. Anyway, while he was there, he gets himself a commission as an ensign in June 1942. After some diesel training, he ends up at the Naval Training Station in Norfolk and then Orange, Texas, to help fit out a new ship. That ship? The USS Pillsbury, DE-133. She was commissioned in June 1943. While fitting her out, David gets promoted again to lieutenant junior grade. He's serving as the assistant engineering and electrical officer on the Pillsbury. So, yeah, he's a seasoned enlisted dude who became an officer, now in charge of making sure the lights are on and the engine goes vroom on a new destroyer escort. The Pillsbury's gig? Escorting convoys across the Atlantic and, later, joining a hunter-killer task force. Sounds cool, right? Now, enter the wild card, Captain Daniel V. Gallery. This guy was a maverick. He was known for his independent thinking, a live and let live attitude, and a sense of humor about military life. He wasn't afraid to challenge conventional wisdom and take bold, innovative risks in combat. He was already known for being unconventional and pioneering 24-hour flight operations. As captain of an escort carrier, he pioneered round-the-clock flight operations to hunt U-boats, which had started remaining submerged during daylight to avoid aircraft. This innovative tactic significantly increased the effectiveness of his anti-submarine task group. He commanded Task Group 22.3, built around the baby flat top, the escort carrier USS Guadalcanal. These things were basically built on the cheap, mass-produced like Ford cars, sometimes by women and high schoolers who weren't eligible for combat roles. People legit wondered if they'd float, but the Guadalcanal turned out to be an effective vessel. Gallery's task group had the Guadalcanal and 5 destroyer escorts, including our man David's ship, the Pillsbury. Their mission wasn't just convoy escort, Gallery's goal was to hunt and kill U-boats. Pretty straightforward, right? But Gallery had a crazier idea. After they pounded another U-boat and the crew bailed out, he saw that U-boat wasn't immediately sinking and thought, hey, what if we captured one? This was a completely unheard of idea. Like, nobody in the U.S. Navy had successfully boarded and captured an enemy warship on the high seas since 1815. It was so out there, he even told guys at the Pentagon about it, including a brilliant officer he called the Souser, who totally had access to top-secret ultra-intelligence, which Gallery didn't know the specifics of, but hey, the guy was good at predicting U-boat locations. Capturing a U-boat was risky business, though, because if the Germans found out their codes were compromised, it could blow the whole ultra-decryption effort wide open and jeopardize the Allied war effort. So, yeah, Gallery had a wild idea, and Navy Command was probably like, that's stupid and dangerous, absolutely not. But Gallery was a maverick. So, what does a maverick do? Gallery started training boarding parties from each of his destroyer escorts. About 9 volunteers from each ship, including the Pillsbury. Lieutenant Albert David was picked to lead the Pillsbury's boarding party. Now, these guys were just kids, mostly straight out of high school. They trained, practicing climbing into whaleboats with heavy gear like chains and crowbars. But they basically thought the whole capture a U-boat thing was a joke. Yeah, right, the Germans are just gonna surrender, they'd say. They had no idea it would actually happen. Fast forward to June 4th, 1944. Just 2 days before D-Day, by the way. Task Group 22.3 is off the coast of French West Africa. They get a sonar contact. It's U-505, commanded by Captain Lieutenant Harold Lang, who was actually heading home, low on fuel and with shot batteries. Lang was having lunch in his black silk pajamas when the contact was made. Sounds relaxing. He popped up the periscope and saw 3 U.S. destroyers, then a carrier. He was smack in the middle of a hunter-killer group. Ah, crap. The attack was on. Depth charges from the destroyers, like the USS Chatelaine, started pounding U-505. Fighter planes from the Guadalcanal spotted the U-boat's silhouette just below the surface and opened fire. The U-boat was hit, its hull breached, and the rudder jammed hard to the right. With his boat damaged and unable to fight effectively, Lang gave the order to abandon ship. The crew started popping out of the hatch and jumping into the water. Now, standard German operating procedure in this situation? Scuttle the boat and set demolition charges. They tried to do that. But between the crew's panic, some internal dysfunction, partly hangover from their previous commander committing suicide at sea, and the chaos, they didn't get it all done. Lang himself was wounded coming out of the hatch, as was his second-in-command. The chief engineer was supposed to order the scuttling, but he reportedly panicked and failed to do it. Only one German crewman, Hans Gobler, managed to open a pipe to let water in, but that wasn't enough to sink it quickly. The 14 demolition charges weren't set off. They had one job. This is where David and his Pillsbury boarding party come in. They zipped across the water in their whaleboat towards the U-boat, which was circling erratically because of the jammed rudder. German sailors they passed in the water were begging to be saved. The Pillsbury guys ignored them. They had a mission. The top deck of the U-boat was spinning, slippery with blood and waves. It was tough just hooking onto the U-boat and climbing aboard. One guy even got seriously injured getting squeezed between the whaleboat and the sub. Rough. Gallery, watching from the Guadalcanal with binoculars, saw them riding the U-boat and yelled, "Hi-yo Silver, away!" Classic. The U-boat's hatch was open. The order was for one of the volunteers to go in first, but Lieutenant David pulled him back. "No," he said, "let me go first." Picture this, David, the 41-year-old officer, plunging down into the dark, unknown depths of the enemy submarine first. He fully expected to get shot by any Germans hiding inside. That single act of bravery, leading the way into that hostile environment, is a huge part of why he got the Medal of Honor. This is main character energy right here. But guess what? He got down there and nobody. The Germans were gone. What he did find was chaos, dark, wet, and water pouring in. The demolition charges were set, but hadn't gone off yet. And that pipe Hans Gobler opened was gushing water 5 feet high. Holy shit! David took charge. He ordered his men to start searching for charges and, crucially, shut the valves and stop the flooding. They found the cover for the open pipe, slapped it back on, and plugged that immediate torrent. They worked fast in the cramped, flooded spaces. This is some MacGyver stuff happening on the high seas. They also started grabbing everything, the Enigma machine, the current Kriegsmarine codebooks, charts, classified stuff. This was the real prize. Men from the Guadalcanal, led by Commander Earl Trocino, the carrier's chief engineer, arrived to help with the salvage. The U-boat was still super low in the water. They had to close the hatch on the guys working below to keep water out, meaning those dudes were stuck down there if the sub sank. Talk about a trust exercise. The Pillsbury tried to tow, but got too close to the circling U-boat, and the sub's bow plane sliced a gash in her hull, flooding 2 compartments. The Pillsbury had to back off, now endanger herself. Shit. Gallery decided he'd do the towing himself with the Guadalcanal. Imagine a baby carrier getting nose-to-nose with a captured U-boat that could potentially still blow up. Only in America, folks. They got a tow line across, but the U-boat was riding weird because of the jammed rudder. The first tow line broke. They got a bigger one on, but the rudder issue was still there. There was a concern about a booby trap on the after torpedo room door, where they needed to get to fix the rudder. Gallery, figuring his ordnance background made him qualified, classic military logic, went over to check it out personally. Turns out, no booby trap. They got into the torpedo room, found the manual steering gear, and finally got the rudder straight. Thank God. Even with the rudder fixed, the U-boat was still sitting low, probably because a ballast tank was ruptured. When the ocean tug USS Abnaki took over the tow, the U-boat sank so low it looked like it was going down for good. They rushed salvage parties back aboard, including a Polish sailor from the U-505 crew named Ewald Felix, who had been conscripted and hated the Germans. Felix knew the boat inside and out, hit the right levers, and helped get U-505 back to a manageable trim. They even rigged the U-boat's electric motors to act as generators while being towed, charging its batteries. That's some serious MacGyver stuff happening on the high seas. They must have had lots of chewing gum and duct tape. The intelligence haul was massive. Getting the Enigma machine and, more importantly, the current codebooks meant the Allies could read German naval messages instantaneously for weeks without needing complex decryption. This was a breathtaking intelligence find just before D-Day. It helped the Allies counter German U-boat operations more effectively. This is why you don't touch the boats. Here's the kicker: this whole operation had to be kept absolutely top secret. Blowing the secret of Ultra could be catastrophic. So, they renamed the U-boat Nemo, Latin for nobody. All 3,000 plus American sailors in the task group who witnessed this had to swear to secrecy under threat of court-martial or even execution. And credit to them, apparently none violated the oath. They even had amazing souvenirs they couldn't talk about. Talk about being blue-balled. The captured German crew? They were basically disappeared. Under the Geneva Convention, they were supposed to be reported to the Red Cross, but the Americans kept their existence secret to prevent the Germans from figuring out U-505 was captured. They were held in isolation in Bermuda, then a POW camp in Louisiana, completely cut off. They tried everything to signal other prisoners they were alive, like writing on turtle shells or sending up balloons marked U-505. None of it worked. The German Navy, and even the exec of U-505 who surrendered to the Pillsbury later, thought the U-505 was lost with all hands. The truth only came out after VE Day. And what about Lieutenant Albert David? For his conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity, leading the boarding party and directing the initial salvage efforts on that dangerous, flooding, potentially booby-trapped boat, he was awarded the Medal of Honor. He also earned 2 Navy Crosses, although one was later withdrawn when the Medal of Honor was awarded, because apparently second plus second equals first, I guess. Tragically, Lieutenant Albert David died of a heart attack on September 17, 1945, in Norfolk, Virginia. He was only 43 years old. He didn't live to receive the Medal of Honor himself. President Harry S. Truman presented the medal to his widow, Linda May David, in a ceremony at the White House on October 5, 1945. David is buried at Fort Rosecrans National Cemetery in San Diego, California. Lieutenant Albert David was the only member of the U.S. Navy in the Battle of the Atlantic to win the Medal of Honor. The capture of U-505 was the first time the U.S. Navy successfully boarded and captured an enemy warship on the high seas since 1815. His legacy lives on. The destroyer escort USS Albert David, DE-1050, later a frigate, was named in his honor. And the U-505? After the war, it went on a war bonds tour, ended up rusting in Maine, and was nearly used for target practice. Gallery, by then a rear admiral, blew a gasket. His family and others in Chicago raised money, and through an act of Congress, the U-boat was transferred to the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago. They fixed it up, sailed it through the Great Lakes, and even had to move it across a busy road one night to get it into the museum's backyard. So, next time you're in Chi-Town, go check out the U-505. And remember Lieutenant Albert David. The enlisted guy who became an officer, the engineering officer who became a boarding party leader, the brave dude who plunged into the darkness of an enemy submarine not knowing if he'd be shot, blown up, or drowned. He's a prime example of stepping up and putting it all on the line. That's the story of a true American hero. Thank you for watching. Best way to support the channel is, well, for them, it was probably buying war bonds or maybe some U-505 souvenirs they weren't allowed to talk about. For you, maybe go check out the U-505 and remember the old bastard who jumped in first, then like and subscribe. That's it. I'm out.